Hey everyone, it's James from the Fit RV, and we're out on a road trip right now, so I'm in the van, not in the shop. So this was going to be the second part of my sound reduction video series, and the plan was to do a before test and then install all the sound deadening stuff that we had identified in the previous video, and then do an after test, and lo and behold, we have a quieter van, things are great. That was the plan, but I can't do that video because the results actually don't back it up, and that's very interesting. But the trouble is that all the footage I have was shot with the assumption that we were going down the happy path, and at the end we're going to have a quieter van. So that leaves me wondering a bit what to do with it all. So I think what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to kind of just act as a narrator. I'm going to pop in like in the middle of the video, and then we'll come in again at the end, and we'll discuss like the results we got and why I think we got them, what the results could be, or what that could indicate, and then what I intend to do about them after that. So that's kind of how it's going to go. So hi, I'm Peter Falk in The Princess Bride. I'm the narrator, and we'll come in again in a little bit. So here's the video you would have seen if everything had gone according to plan. Hey everyone, it's James from the Fit RV, and welcome to RV Automotive Sound Deadening Part 2. So if you remember, in the first video, we did a little investigation on how to tame the sounds in our Ford Transit-based RV, and I came up with an approach with 3 different materials, and I tried them out on a little proof of concept, a little metal box. That worked actually really, really well. So that's kind of my green light to go ahead with Part 2, and today I'm actually going to begin the install of the materials, which means soon this van won't even have seats. But before I can do that, we need to take some before measurements so we'll know how well we do. So here's how that's going to go. Weather, it's a straight up 100 degrees and mild winds today. Tire pressure, I inflated them to spec this morning, and they've risen up about 5-6 psi since then. I'm going to go on the freeway to a particular mile marker, and then that's when we're going to start our test, so we can hit the same stretch of road on the way, once we're finished. I've got my phone here with the sound measuring apps kind of mounted ear level in the coach, in the middle of the coach. We're going to drive for 1 mile, measuring just the overall decibels, and the app will take an average, and that's going to be sort of our gold standard for how we're going to measure success. Then we'll take a mile to reset, and in the 3rd mile, we will turn on the spectrum analyzer. We will look at the frequencies of the sounds that we're hearing while we drive and see what we get. I don't know if that's going to be anything useful or if it's just going to look like white noise. We'll see when we get there. So since I won't be able to talk once we start doing the test, this is kind of it for now. So let's just get to it. All right, so we had our test runs. The overall numbers didn't seem to, on first glance, seem to be as loud as I thought they would be, but we'll see what we get when we download the data. In the meantime, it's time to get to work. So say goodbye to the seats. So that was our baseline, our before test. And the first thing I hope you noticed from that is that in an absolute sense, we weren't really all that loud to begin with. I mean, when I pulled the report for the average decibels for that first mile run, we went a little longer than a mile, it came up with an average level of just 70.1 decibels A-weighted. Now that's kind of dishwasher or maybe washing machine, or that relative you have that talks really loud. It's that kind of level of noise. It's not something that's considered harmful, but so there's no exposure limits or anything, but I can tell you that it is something that if you have to listen to it on a cross-country drive, it gets on your nerves after a while. So it's still definitely worth doing something about. So that's sort of the overall decibels. Now, on the frequency graph, there weren't really any standout issues there either. It just kind of rolled off at the higher frequencies and squiggled and squirmed about that line and didn't really do anything remarkable. So I didn't consider that there was anything I really needed to do in particular, anything I needed to try to eliminate with the sound absorbing materials. So with that as a background, let's get to the install of the 3 different kinds of sound absorbing material. Back to the video. Okay, so we've made it this far. This is things that I've removed from the cab of the RV so far, and my original plan was to pull everything out of the cab and then just kind of have a clean slate and go and put stuff in. But after getting things mostly apart, there are a couple wrinkles that are going to make me change my plan. So this is probably about all that's going to come out at once. So let's go outside and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So there are a couple problems. One problem is that this floor thing is this floor mat covering. And you can see here, Ford actually has tried to put some constrained layer damping material into the vehicle already. So here's some foil, and then there's some other foam up in other areas. But it's kind of hit or miss. Maybe they figured it out, but there's like that sounds pretty bad. That sounds pretty bad. So, but they tried. Credit to them. But the big problem with this floor thing is that it's got holes cut in it, and it's cut around things like this that's holding the whole dash up. And I don't know that I necessarily want to go pulling that out and that out just to get this floor thing out. Because, I mean, I do want to finish at some point, right? So, anyway. So I've changed my plan. I'm not going to be able to remove... Oh, and it gets even worse over here on the driver's side. And then there's this... giant channel of electrical stuff under here that's underneath this. So, I really don't want to remove, say, that. So there's a limit to how far apart we can get things, at least here on the floor. So what I'm going to do is I've got it kind of halfway apart. I'm just going to hold this back and work on this side of the floor up to this giant channel of electrical stuff. And we'll do this part and maybe behind. Then we'll go over to the other side and then we'll do that side. So we're going to do it one side at a time. So the first thing I've got to do is to vacuum all the cat hair out of here. No. And then, as you should do when you're going to use any kind of adhesive in an RV project, is wipe it down good with denatured alcohol so that you don't have any residue that would prevent you from getting good adhesion. Because remember, good adhesion of the constrained layer damping material is important. So that's next, is vacuuming and wiping down this half. All right. All right, we're here at the end of a long day 1, and I think I'm going to call it for today. So what we've done, we've gotten all of the tear out that I'm going to do done, and then we've got on the passenger side here, because it was easier, we've got pretty much all the sound material, sound absorbing material, blocking material installed. So first we installed the constrained layer damping, the damplifier. Concentrated mainly on the flat areas. Again, chased it with, you'll see I've got a variety of rollers out here. Second Skin actually sends you a roller when you buy their stuff. It's kind of cool. Anyway, adhered this down. I've got well more than 60% of the area covered. And I did the floor kind of up as far as I could get up in here. I even did this little B-pillar part. I did the step well here, and most importantly, I did the wheel well. Then I came back with the Luxury Liner Pro, the mass-loaded vinyl. This is the stuff that blocks sound. And here on this side, I've just kind of laid it on the floor. And I'm not going to adhere it down or anything like that because it's not going to go anywhere, especially by the time I bolt the seat back down on top of it. It's not going to be moving, and it's going to be under this anyway. So that's just laid down here. Cutting it is kind of... well, it's interesting. You've got to locate holes and leave holes, where you have to get tabs or screws or something like your bolts back in. You got to leave holes for that. Other than that, you just cut it with a utility knife. That's pretty easy. But to note, up here on the wheel well, and this part I think was pretty important. Now the wheel well is where I feel like we're getting a lot of that tire noise coming up through the wheel well. So I wanted to make sure to get this covered. So I do have some of this double-sided tape underneath, keeping it where it's not just laying flat. So that's sticking out. Learning, it's better to apply this tape to the curved surfaces, because once you apply, this tape is pretty rigid. Once you apply the tape to this foam, the foam doesn't want to bend anymore. So apply the tape to the bent surface first and then form the foam around it. Something I learned. Anyway, I've got it. Remember, one of the keys for success with this stuff is that there's no gaps. And when I did our proof of concept, I was able to get foil tape to stick to it and close up the gaps. But the foil tape, I don't know if it's the heat, it's like 105 out here. The foil tape wasn't working here. So I had to get gaff tape, my gaffer's tape. This stuff is awesome, and that seems to be working to hold all these seams together. So I've got complete coverage of the wheel well right up under here. I'm not going to pull the dash out. That's a level of dedication that I'm just not down for. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for here. Now I don't know what I'm going to do in the middle. Let me show you the problem I've got there. Here in the middle, this hump, there is actually just an insane amount of electrical cabling up under here. And then on top of that electrical cabling, there's this hard, call it kind of polystyrene foam sort of stuff that's molded to fit the contours of this cabling very well. And then that polystyrene stuff is sort of glued to the floor. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I tried just to take a piece of this stuff and see if I could fit it under there, and it gets kind of really odd. So I don't think I want to do that. So I mean, it's hot enough. This stuff ought to just come right off. I may just peel this off, stick that down, and then put this on top of that, and then put the flooring back on top of that. We're going to see what I can come up with for that. But I think I'm going to leave that for last, because this is going to fit in whatever I do on the driver's side, which is going to be a little more complicated than the passenger side just because of all the wiring and stuff over there. But anyway, that's kind of the end of day one on a 3-day thing. I think tomorrow, if I get this and this done, and then the final day I'll do the doors, and hopefully that has me on track for 3 days, because it's a 3-day weekend. So, all right, that's it. Well, it's just before 6 o'clock on day 2, and I don't often get to say this with my projects, but I am on schedule. I got the remainder of the floor done today. That's the driver's side floor with both the Dynamat and the Luxury Liner Pro. Couple things I learned along the way. First, the actual floor of the Transit is just like this rubber stuff, and this goes all the way up on top of the wheel well, and to remove it, you can just pull it because it's not attached. But to put it back in, I would have had to remove the entire dash. And so I just decided that I didn't need this piece, and so I cut them off. And it's just staying up there. It's fine. You'll never see it. It's literally behind the dash. Anyway, had to cut those off. Next thing I learned, especially on the driver's side, where I couldn't remove as much because I've got, I had the steering wheel coming through the floor mat. I had like the parking brake. I had the seat. I had a whole bunch of electronics. Couldn't remove as much. Templates, very, very useful. So save your Amazon delivery boxes for a week or two before trying this, because you'll need it, because it's easy to shove this up under the mat and trim it to where it'll fit, and then you just take it, you cut your luxury liner, and boom, it goes right in. Perfect. On the damplifier, so smaller rollers I've found are better. This is actually the little tiny one that Second Skin sent me. I wound up using that a lot. Another one I wound up using a lot is one I actually got from Eternabond. This thing weighs like 3 pounds. It's a very heavy roller, but it's got this curved kind of end to it. And it's actually even on ball bearings. Like, it's just rolling. So this is very helpful because, the floor has got all those little ridges in it, and they're actually like a like a circular kind of profile. And so this circular one, you're able to get into all those creases of them. So that worked really well. Okay, next thing. I finally put on my first piece of the Megazorb stuff, this adhesive-backed melamine foam. And I put it in the center of the dash, way at the bottom. There's a little piece, just a trim piece, and there was a big empty space behind it. And so that's where I put the Megazorb, just to absorb any sound that would have been coming out of that empty space, because I wasn't able to get the other products up under there. So this stuff, just if you get it, has the most insanely sticky peel and stick backing I have ever worked with ever in my life. So it's very much like contact cement, and it is going to stick to the first thing it comes in contact with. And 99% of the time, that's your fingers. So just beware. It's more sticky than you think it is. Technique I found that's helpful is if you can pinch the back of it and just hold on to that while you work with it, and then you don't have to grab the foreside, because as soon as you grab it, it is on your fingers and it's hard to get off. So the floor is done. We've got the damplifier, we've got the luxury liner on there. I got well over 60% coverage with the damplifier, even in spite of the electronics and the parking brakes and such. And I got pretty close on the passenger side to 100% coverage of the floor and wheel well with the luxury liner. On the driver's side, I got the wheel well for sure, 100%. And then the floor, I got probably like 80 to 90%. And then in the center of that hump, down the center, I got pretty good, like 70, 80% of that as well. So tomorrow, we start on the doors, and that's like a whole new ball of fun. So yay, tomorrow. All right, welcome to day 3. And I do think I'm going to finish today, so an on-schedule project. It's a rarity. And, of course, I'm bleeding. But I'm not bleeding from any knives or any tools or anything like that. I cut myself on the sheet metal on the inside of the door, of course. Okay, so I've already done the driver's door because it's on the sunny side of the vehicle, and we live in the desert, and if I wait too long, it gets so hot you can't touch it. So that side's done. Showing you what's going on the passenger side. I have applied the damplifier all on the outside skin of the door, so it's all attached to it. Now I've got well more than 60% covered. I just covered whatever was easy in giant square pieces. By the way, tip, giant pieces don't work so good because you got to get them in the door and get that backing off of them. Smaller pieces, like 6 by 8 kind of pieces, those work well inside the door. Cutting it, not a problem. Just, use a utility knife. But here's the thing. If you're using a utility knife, this or the luxury liner or anything, change your blade like it's disposable, because it is. Most people let these things get way too dull, and then they get frustrated and it doesn't cut well and it ruins stuff. Just change the blades. Get a back of 100 and just keep changing them like every few cuts. It's fine, really. Anyway, cut it with that little roller. Some places inside the door are great. You can get the roller on there. Some places you just can't get this, no matter how small it is. So you're working it with your fingers, and that's hence you get the cuts. Anyway, so I've applied the damplifier to the outer skin of the door, and then I've applied it to the back. You'll see some installs where this whole thing looks like tinfoil, but I've applied it to the back, like these back surfaces of this inner skin of the door, just where I had big, big-ish sort of areas. So I've applied that there. So I think I'm done with the damplifier. So all that's left now on this is the absorbing foam. There's not any place in here that would be really amenable to me putting on that luxury liner. There's too many. I got a cable here. I got all sorts of electronics inside the door, wire runs. Putting on the luxury liner pro, I don't think that would work too well in here, so I'm not going to do that. We're just going to go with the sound absorbing foam, and that is next. All right, closing in on the end. I've got the Megazorb, the foam, sound absorbing foam in there. Be very careful when you do this not to. There are holes in the bottom of your door, like if your window is wet and you retract it, that water needs someplace to go. So there are holes in the bottom of the door. Be very careful not to plug those holes, or you'll wind up with a moisture problem inside your door. I didn't. So I've got this all sort of installed. Now, one thing I've done that I'm going to show you how I did, just because I think it's kind of fun, is so these vapor barrier little panel things. I've put 2 of them back. There were 3 on here. So I've got this one, and then this one. And I've got this... I stuck some of the foam to the back side of the thing. So it's kind of like a foam sandwich in there. So it's directly between you and the noise. And so I'm going to show you how I did that. And that starts inside with the panel. So these are held on to the van with this kind of butyl tape, sticky stuff. I just had it, I was using a solar panel as like a cover just to keep this from getting like cat hair and dust in it while I was working, because there was room under the panel for the, anyway. So we take this and we're gonna hang it up temporarily back in place. So, because not every place where it looks like you could put foam is actually a good place to put the foam. So we gotta just lightly set that back in place. So now this one is more complicated than either of these, because I've got this is the power window mechanism that I don't wanna get any foam around. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna just trace on here where I think we could have some foam. We'll just stop there. Something like that. There we go. Okay. So we can kind of pull this down and head into the shop. It's kind of sticky because it's kind of hot out here. Lay the foam out backside up. Very important, backside up, as I learned with the first piece I tried. So the backside has to stick to this. Then set your pattern down on the top of it, and then just as best as you can, kind of transfer the line from above to below. And it's going to be kind of a crappy looking line, but that's okay. It'll be inside the door. No one will see it. Then cut out on your hokey line. Line it up, drop it on. All right. And there's really no magic to this. You just set it down and it sticks. But then I go back, since this is what's keeping the moisture out of the inside of the vehicle, I go back and mash it down pretty good. All right, we're ready to put the door back together. Ta-da. Okay, it's time for the after test. Now, I'm just going to say we drove out to the same spot where we're going to launch off from, and qualitatively, it sounds quieter to me, especially like at low speeds, driving around the neighborhood and stuff. But I don't know how much of that's just wishful thinking because I put all this time and effort and money into this, and so that's why we're going to do the test anyway. So, but I am fully prepared for the results to be less than spectacular. Noise is a funny thing, and though I did a whole lot here in the doors, on the floor, and wheel wells, there's a whole lot I didn't do anything about. Another 23 feet of stuff back there, the windshield, the wind noise. Remember, we didn't touch those. So we'll see. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to go out to the same stretch of road. The temperature is 101 today. It was 100 last time. And the tires are inflated to the same pressure. We've got the same voice or the same noise recorder, and it's in the same spot. So nothing to do but get to it. And this is where things kind of started to go off the rails. So as you can see in the video, the overall sound level in A-weighted decibels in the after test wasn't that much different from the before test. When I exported the report for the average decibel reading over that same mile stretch of road, it was 69.7 decibels. Now remember, our before reading was only 70.1 decibels, so my efforts got me a net reduction in overall sound level of 0.4 decibels. Yay! So things weren't much different on the frequency response graph either. I lined up as best I could the two graphs, on the same stretch of road, and through the magic of video editing, I can just overlay one on top of the other and make it kind of transparent. And when I do that, basically the two white lines just line up over each other and squirm around. There's really nothing remarkable that happens there. So, a whole lot of effort and not a lot to show for it. That's not a very satisfying result. But it's certainly an interesting one. So why exactly did that happen? Or in this case, not happen? What could be some reasons for that? Well, first off, maybe the materials suck. I mean, that's certainly a possible explanation, but I don't think it's very plausible. Because remember, when we did the proof of concept, we were able to get a greater than 20 decibel reduction in the noise level on our little metal test box. So we know that correctly applied, these materials do in fact work. But it's that correctly applied that brings us to possible reason number 2. Maybe I suck. And I've learned this is always a good possibility to evaluate, not just in experiments, but in all walks of life, really. Why is Steph mad at me? Maybe I suck. Why is my Wi-Fi not working? Maybe I suck. Why did the cat bite me? Maybe I suck. So we have to allow for the possibility that I just did something wrong and it ruined the experiment. Now, if we were talking about interpersonal relationships, I would really need to examine this. But in this case, I don't think that's the problem because this was not my first rodeo. I do have a good bit of experience with RV projects and even sound deadening projects, and they usually turn out okay. I went back over my checklist of what makes for a good install of these materials, and I hit all the boxes, I rolled it on, I got complete coverage, etc. I even did things like install the damplifier in Luxury Liner Pro underneath 80 pounds of lead acid batteries just because I wanted to get good coverage. So I really don't think I screwed up the install. But if you think you know of something I did wrong and you are not a former romantic interest, feel free to leave a comment on whether or not you think I suck. And that brings us to number 3. If the materials don't suck, and hopefully I don't suck, maybe my experiment design just sucked. Maybe my project actually did work in some way, but my experiment was set up so that I didn't actually capture that result. And I think this might be what happened. Let me explain. So first off, right after the install, when Steph and I rolled out of the neighborhood on the way to go do our test, we both thought, wow, we thought I had hit a home run. This is really quiet. We were completely convinced that it was quieter. And it wasn't just us. The cat thought it was quieter as well. How do I know this? Well, currently we're on a cross-country road trip. And on this trip, Mel has taken to napping on the floor directly between our seats. And this is something that he has never done literally ever in the history of ever. So while I think maybe I've got a bias in wanting my experiment to turn out okay, and maybe even Steph has a bias, I can't imagine that the cat has any interest at all in how my experiment turned out. So if all 3 of us think so, perhaps it really was quieter. At least, at low speeds. But then the faster we got going, the more that advantage dissipated, at least where the microphone was. Perhaps as we got going faster, the wind noise became a dominant factor. Because remember, way back in the beginning, I said I wasn't going to do anything about the wind noise. So, speed is one potential flaw in my experiment design. I only took before measurements at 70 miles an hour. I should have taken some more readings at lower speeds, which might have shown the result that we all think we heard. So just to see, and this is just FYI, we did go back out and take readings at 40 miles an hour. And we got a reading of 65.3 decibels average. So we don't have a before reading there, so take that for what it's worth. But the cab noise was definitely quite a bit quieter at 40 than it was at 70. And that really shouldn't be surprising to anyone. But then we have this thing with the cat napping on the floor even at 70 miles an hour. So maybe it was quieter on the floor where the cat is, but just not where our ears and the microphone were. So perhaps microphone placement is another flaw in my experiment design. So if you remember, I put the microphone sort of in the center of the coach at ear level, you know, because that's where we hear. But I only applied the sound reducing materials to the doors and the floor right there. So if you think about me in profile sitting in the driver's seat, you know, I applied the soundproofing materials over like maybe this 60-degree range, leaving 300 degrees of a circle where noise could come from. So maybe that's where the noise is coming from. Can I do anything about that noise? Well, that's tricky. First, I don't think I can do anything about the speed issue because I can't go back in time to take before measurements. And I'm certainly not going to rip out all the soundproofing materials just to redo a before measurement. And even if I found another echo to test, like a vanilla out-of-the-box echo, I wouldn't know if the differences in noise level were due to my soundproofing or Steph's 600 ridiculous throw pillows that we have to carry on every trip for some reason. So I'm just going to have to live with that speed flaw in the experiment. And maybe I suck. Okay, but that 60 degrees out of 360 degrees thing, did I just not treat enough of the van to make a difference? Can I treat it more to get a better result? Is there an opportunity to do something further there? Well, first, remember, though I call it a van, ours is technically, as you can see, a Class C RV. So I don't have access to the inside of the outer skin of the vehicle in the back, and the walls, they're glued laminations, right? I can't really disassemble them to add soundproofing to the inside. But I do have this big forehead area above the glass that I could apply materials to. So, is it worth tearing apart the forehead area to see if I can kill some more noise? Well, we can try to find that out with, guess what, another test. You see, Winnebago provides echo owners, where is it, with this thermal curtain that sort of snaps in, sort of above and behind the seats, and it just comes with the echo. Now, its main purpose is for insulation in extreme hot or cold temperatures, so it's not exactly a soundproof blanket by any means, but it is heavy, it is limp, and it will only be attached at these few points, you know, where the snaps are, so it's only going to be coupled there. So it should do a good enough job blocking the sound that we should at least be able to notice something. Now, we're not at home, and I can't use that same stretch of road, obviously, and it's also not 100 degrees here. There's more humidity, we're loaded differently, blah, 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 blah. So this won't be perfect, but here's what we're going to do. Now, today is a driving day, so we're going to head out on today's drive, and I'm going to set the phone and the sound measuring app up right where we had it last time, and we'll take a before reading. Now, it should be close, but not exactly that 69.7 decibels or so that we saw. Then I'll snap up the thermal curtain and we'll do an after reading. Now, if it's lower, that would at least prove out that there are significant contributions to the noise I'm hearing that are coming from above and behind the driver's seat. So, you know, I don't have to feel like I failed so badly at the soundproofing if that one's quieter, right? Because there's a lot that I didn't do anything about. Now, depending on how that goes, I may even try to snap up like just the back and leave the top open, or snap in just the top and leave the back, or maybe tape up some other blankets around here. I don't know, but I'm going to try to figure something out because I've never tried to use a curtain in that way. I don't know if it'll work. We'll see when we get there. That's kind of the plan for now, though, is to try to figure out if the forehead area, which is behind here, which I can do something about, is a significant contributor to the noise. Based on whatever happens with all that, I'll either be doing some more soundproofing treatments to this forehead area or just giving up. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so we were looking like, it looked like just when stuff was glancing, 64, 65 decibels, which is significant. So now we're trying with the back curtain up, but leaving the top open. So seeing how much noise is coming at us from above. Kinda. I realize it's not perfect. So now I've got the curtain up just on the top part. So we're trying to block just sort of the noise from above and leaving the back open. This, I guess, kind of mimics how it would be if I got really good results of sound insulating up top. So here we go. And I promise we are really closing in on the end of the video. There are a couple things I want to point out about the tests you just saw. Now, the first one is we did not use the same stretch of road for each run because we had places to be. We needed to get going. But we did take multiple runs for each one that you saw. Like we were discarding runs because, you know, a big RV went by, or we were discarding runs because it was kind of cracky concrete and we were looking for smooth blacktop. So I do have some confidence that those results are comparable to each other, if not to the initial readings from our test mile stretch at home. Now, second, and I think most people still watching this know this already, but decibels is not a linear measurement. It's a logarithmic one. And further, it doesn't exactly measure what you perceive as loudness as a human. So like twice as loud or half as loud, those are like psychoacoustical phenomenons that could vary from person to person. But what decibels measures is the sound pressure level. And in that realm, an increase or decrease of 3 decibels is twice as much or half as much sound pressure, but you wouldn't necessarily perceive that as twice as loud or half as loud. For the record, roughly 10 decibels is what a human being will perceive as twice as loud or half as loud. Fine, okay. So on with the results. Well, our initial as is with the soundproofing I've already done measurement came in at 66.2 decibels. So that's our new before measurement. And then when I put the curtain up, like all of the curtain, it dropped the sound level down to 64.6 decibels, which is the best reading I've ever gotten. And we certainly noticed that. And if you do the math, it's kind of about a 30% reduction in sound pressure level. So that had Steph and I talking about whether or not we wanted to drive all the time with this curtain up. And for the record, we decided no. So then we tried just the back part of the curtain up and leaving the top open. And the sound level there was 65.4 decibels, or a 0.8 decibel reduction over no curtain at all. That's about a 17% reduction in sound pressure level, and subjectively, Steph and I kind of thought maybe it was a little bit quieter, but not nearly as quiet as the whole curtain. And then finally, with just the top of the curtain in place and the back open, we measured 64.9 decibels, or a reduction of 1.3 decibels over no curtain at all. That actually reduced the sound pressure levels by about 26%. Now, it's more than the back alone, but it's not as much as the whole curtain. So Steph and I were pretty blown out by that point, so I don't have a good subjective gauge of what our feelings were about that. It was probably something along the lines of, yeah, it's quieter, let's just be done. Anyway, that's why we take the measurements. Now, the first interesting thing there is that blocking sound from above in the forehead space actually produced a better result than blocking the sound from just the back. Now that is my kind of result because it implies that I can actually get a better result by covering less area and doing less work. Cool, okay. So based on that and the fact that I got 3 times more of a decibel reduction with just that blanket than I did with everything I did in the first part of the video, I think it's reasonable to try to treat at least the forehead and what remains of the roof of the cab. But since we're on the road, that's going to have to wait until we get back home to my shop, so I guess there will be, at some point, a part 3 the soundproofing videos. But the other interesting thing is that, I guess, RVs are different from cars. And that's obvious, but you sort of need to take that into account when you're planning out your sound reduction strategy. So like in a car, the forehead, right? Well, there usually isn't one. You know, it's just glass and then it goes to the roof. And you can't do anything about that because the engineers spend a lot of time in wind tunnels trying to make sure the air flows smoothly from the windshield up over the roof and doesn't make a lot of noise and cause a lot of turbulence. But in an RV, you've got something that was added by an RV manufacturer, and they probably spent 0 time in a wind tunnel trying to smooth the airflow over the forehead and roof. Your RV might even have a big cab over bunk kind of thing, and you know, might have big old 2-foot wide wing walls on the sides of the cab, and those can cause quite a bit of turbulence and quite a bit of noise. And those, different from a car, will be things you'll want to pay attention to in addition to the regular automotive stuff. So treat your RV like a car and then some. Okay, wow, this was a super long video series, but I learned a lot and hopefully you did too. Based on all this, there will definitely be a part 3 coming down the line. In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on the post that is linked in the YouTube description down below. It's on thefitRV.com and I will try my best to answer them. That's it for now. This is James from the Fit RV. We'll see you later.